Right, morning all. I think we'll start the webinar, and then if anyone else joins in late, then that's no problem whatsoever. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Kayleen Harrington and I've recently joined the Norfolk Chambers of Commerce, and I'll be looking after their full events programme moving forwards. So I hope you're enjoying our July offering of webinars and virtual events. So thank you so much for attending this morning. I've put the events linked in the chat function, so feel free to view this after the webinar and book on any. They are completely free to attend. Ranking in search engine has always been important for businesses, but even more so now as we see many businesses going through radical transformation and consumers shifting the behaviour online at a speed we have not seen before. But what does it take to get traffic from Google, and how do we go about it? Mark Williams-Cook, Director of Canada, will be presenting today's webinar. You're welcome to ask questions during the presentation. There'll also be a live Q&A afterwards. So please use the Q&A function when you have a question. So without further ado, Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen quickly. Hold on. So I'd like to apologize to everyone before I begin, which is always a great place to start. Can you see my screen? Just checking.
We can see the whole presentation rather than
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. That's where I want to go from. So there we go. So yeah, I just want to apologize to everyone before I start. My voice doesn't normally sound like this. I'm not sure what's going on with it, but I will try my best to get through. As we said, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A as we go. For those that kind of joined late, this presentation, it's a non-technical introduction to SEO, and it's aimed at business owners, but I'm more than happy if you've got sort of specific technical questions to go through those. So I'll just get going. You don't have to worry too much about kind of taking notes or anything or writing down the links I'm going to give. So this presentation, there's a PDF version already online, and I'm sure Chamber will email you the link, but you can get it from our website /sbseo.pdf. Today, we're just going to cover basically what is SEO from a business perspective, how you can estimate its value. We'll chat a little bit about Google's algorithm and what's worth knowing and what's worth not knowing. And the whole process from my side on what's involved in SEO and what you should expect as a business owner. And right at the end, I've got some links for tools and resources that can help you and things you can kind of go away and do today. So for those that don't know me or haven't met me before, my name is Mark Williams-Cook. I've been working in SEO digital marketing for about the last 15 years, and I've built and sold my own businesses from SEO. And I've also been lucky enough to head up 3 agencies and got to work with some really challenging clients in difficult sectors like Expedia, Faqs, those kinds of people. So I've had a good kind of overview of what everyone's doing in SEO and what works and what doesn't. Currently, I'm director of an agency called Canada. We're based in Norwich. We work with clients all over the world, helping them with kind of web SEO digital. So we'll start on something probably seems really basic, which is what's in a Serp. So the word Serp is something you'll hear, no doubt, if you talk to people about SEO, and it stands for Search Engine Result Pages. And it contains both organic and paid listings. And I've broken them down here for you. So in red, you've got paid listings, and essentially anyone can appear here using Google's ad platform, Google Ads, and you pay on a cost per click basis. What we're going to be talking about today mainly is what we refer to as the organic listings, which are normally below the paid listings. And these are what we can affect with SEO. So they're called organic listings or natural listings. So when we talk about SEO, a lot of people's minds straight away jumps to this, which is kind of the standard web links, the standard 10 blue links. And the first thing, before I even kind of talk to you in any depth about SEO, is just go through with you. There's actually a lot of diversity in 2020 in different search results. And you need to work out where you and your business kind of fits in. So it's not just about ranking highly in these results. So to give you some examples, you've probably all seen these boxes, the map pack or local listings. So these are primarily, again, organically driven, so primarily not paid. And there's a whole different set of parameters Google uses to decide who should rank in these map packs. So actually, if you've got a very localized business, this is something you should be considering, and it's very different to kind of getting your website to rank in these kind of results. And then when you do a search on Google, you've got this drop down more, and you've got things like news, videos, maps, images. These are actually all search verticals. So if you click on one of these, you'll just get that type of search result. And you've probably all seen when we do a search now, a default search in all, we get a mix of these. So this is what we refer to as universal search results. So again, if I give you some examples, if you search for something like Prime Minister, Google knows that this is something that regularly comes up in the news. So these top results here are actually from the Google News vertical, and it's a completely separate thing to these normal organic results. So if you're a newspaper, there's a specific news feed you have to submit to be eligible even to appear here. If you do searches, so I've done one here for solar eclipse photos, and even though I'm in all results, the first thing Google's done is it's pulled image results out and put them above organic listings. Again, because it's decided that's what the searcher intent is. And actually, if we think about Google Images, it's really popular for e-commerce websites. So if I do a search something like dog coats, you'll see actually Google's integrated paid for ads, so these sponsored ones in the images, and then these are organic results here. So with many e-commerce sites, we see behavior where people will search for a product, and rather than looking for individual websites, they'll go into images and visually scroll through until they find something they like and click on it. So again, if you have an e-commerce site, Google image optimization is something you need to be considering. And then we've got different search features in the normal search results. So I've got an example here. Again, you might have seen these boxes called People Also Ask. So I've searched for how to change a car battery, and Google shows all the related questions here directly from different websites. We actually built a tool to help with this, which is called alsoask.com. It's free. And what you can do is you can go to this website, type in a topic, something like dog coats, and it will give you all of the related questions that people ask. So dog coats, people ask, do dogs even need coats? How do I know if my dog is cold? And this gives you a steer on what the searcher, your customer's intent is, and what content maybe you should be creating for your site. FAQs, frequently asked questions. Again, you may have seen this type of feature in search results. This is something specifically you need to optimize for. There's a type of what's called schema, which is a way to label your data to be eligible for these to appear. If you've ever searched for a recipe, you've probably seen these recipe cards. Again, this is something specific you have to do extra to be eligible for these kind of results. And a really common one is this featured snippets, which is where you type in a search query and Google will actually pull up a snippet from a web page that it thinks best answers that query. And again, there's really specific ways that you can optimize for this. So as an experiment, if you search on Google for how many arms does Mark Williams Cook have, hopefully you'll still get that I tricked Google into thinking I have 512 arms, because there's different ways to optimize for this. I noticed Google's particularly bad at arms and legs. It's fixed them now, but it used to think pigeons have 4 legs and rabbits have 200 legs. The point being, there's specific things you can do to optimize for these kind of results. So that's the first, before we get going, kind of takeaway I want to give you, which is when you're thinking about SEO, it's not just about this kind of 1 to 10 ranking. There's all different kinds of organic search results, and there's lots of different tactics that exist to optimize for each kind of result, in some cases even to be eligible for it. So what is SEO? I like to just put this definition out there so it's super clear. So this is the definition I use, which is the process of maximizing visitors to a particular property by ensuring it appears high on the list of search results returned by a search engine. A couple of things I want to point out with this definition. Firstly, I've said maximizing visitors. So this doesn't necessarily, as I said earlier, always mean increasing ranking. It could be doing things to increase the amount of people that click on your result, whether it's, even if it stays third. And I've put particular property here because this doesn't just apply to websites, and it doesn't just apply to Google search. There's, for instance, YouTube is the second most popular search engine in the UK. And a lot of these principles you can use to get your videos, your properties to rank better in YouTube. So SEO is actually quite broad. And as business owners, one thing you kind of might consider is, why is search traffic valuable? What's so good about search traffic? Because you've got all kinds of people telling you you should be doing email marketing and social media, or you should be cold calling people. This is what I think's so powerful about search marketing. So firstly, you have a great indication of your customer intent, because you literally are targeting the words that they're typing in to a search, which is really, really powerful. And critically, combined with that, you're getting the customer at exactly the right time. So it's like if someone was thinking about building a conservatory, and as soon as they think that, you put a leaflet through their letterbox right at that moment, and it answers all of the questions they've been thinking about. Also, what's really important for me is it's permission based. So unlike something like if you're cold calling someone, these people are requesting this information. So you're actually helping them with exactly what they want when they want. And lastly, as a side to that, there's lots of interesting studies that show consumers trust Google, or really consumers trust the websites that Google ranks. So if you rank #1 in Google, there's this assumption that you must be a good business because Google's put you there. You can actually estimate value in pounds and pence though. So if I give you this example of a search term such as artificial plants, there's around 33,000 searches per month in the UK for artificial plants. We've got this number called CPC, which is cost per click, and it's 51p. And what that's telling us is, if you were to buy this search term on the Google Ads platform, so you said, I want my advert to appear when someone searches for this, Google would charge you around about 50 pence per click on your advert. And the way that price is determined is actually by a market rate of different advertisers bidding against each other. So this market rate here is not set by Google. This is set by advertisers. So it's a really useful number, because what it gives you is kind of the going rate for a visitor for a search term. So what we can say is, if someone searches for artificial plants, on average, most businesses can extract at least 51 pence of value per visitor. So if we're thinking about SEO, if we said, okay, we are going to rank we rank #1 for artificial plants, how much potentially could that be worth for us? One way you can estimate this is by working out what it would cost to pay for that traffic, because it's the same search traffic. So if we conservatively said, if we rank #1, if only 10% of these searchers click on our advert and we pay 51 pence per click, we could say ranking #1 for artificial plants is roughly worth about £1,700 a month. So it's a really good way to start getting an idea of, is it worth how much you need to pay for it, or pay someone to get you there? And we can apply this. I found another search term. So landlord's insurance has got about the same amount of searches per month, but it's significantly more expensive. So it's about £16 a click. So using the same sum, if 10% of people, 10% of 33,000 click on our link, and we were paying £16 for it, it's worth about £54,000 a month to rank #1 for landlord's insurance, as you can well imagine. And this varies throughout the industry. The most expensive one I could find was Play Live Blackjack, which Google will charge you, if you pay for an ad, £127 per visitor. So as we know, kind of iGaming is really, really competitive online. So the key concept here is, it's possible to give rough estimates of the value of SEO traffic based on the market price of individual key phrases. It's worth noting, though, that this value may not reflect the value to your business. So while this is on average what businesses are prepared to pay for those visitors, if, for instance, you were competing against me and we were both selling something, but I could procure my stock at half the cost you could, obviously I can afford to pay more per visitor. So there are it doesn't automatically mean it's going to produce that much value for you, but it's a very good kind of way to judge the value of search traffic independent of what your business is doing. There's a tool here I've linked to, again, you'll be able to get this from the slides, with Canada/Semrush. This tool will give you a free breakdown of what your competitors are ranking for, what the value of their search traffic is, and if they're doing any paid ads, actually what they're bidding on. So it's a really neat tool to do that for free. So again, as a business owner, you might be kind of wondering what SEO consists of, what should you expect? And there's three main we refer to them as kind of pillars of SEO, which is there's technical SEO, which is essentially working out if search engines can find and understand all of your pages, because search engines obviously are looking at websites automatically, and they themselves have technical limitations that can sometimes cause issues. Secondly, there's normally a content side you'll focus on, which is all about, does your content meet user intent? So in terms of the quality of your content, the format. So by format, I mean, if you do a lot of searches, for instance, on how-to guides, you'll see a lot of videos now. And that's because Google knows people would prefer to watch videos. So if there's all videos ranking first and you're writing articles, you're never going to be first. So that's what we look at in terms of content. And lastly, links is about getting your site coverage and citations from other relevant authoritative websites. That's an important thing that search engines use to make a judgment on how good your web pages are. That's if other people are linking to them and talking about them. And while we're kind of talking about, going to get into talking about what we can do to get websites to rank, as business owners, I don't think it's important at all that you understand specific parts of Google's algorithm. You could spend a full-time job trying to do that, and it's not worth it. The important thing as a business owner that you need to understand is, what is Google's desired output? What's their long-term goal for this algorithm? Because the algorithm is just a means to an end. And if you focus on the end, then you'll never be too far strategically off course. So it probably, hopefully doesn't come as a surprise that Google wants to make money. They're very good at it. They made about $160 billion in 2019. And it's helpful to understand that the majority of this income comes from their advertising, which is primarily through their search engine. So how does what we're doing with SEO align or contribute to this? Well, Google want their search results to return the highest possible satisfaction to their users. And the reason they want to do that is more people use their search engine, which in turn drives them greater advertising profits because it's a bigger audience. And it's quite clear, obviously, why a lot of people do use Google. It does work very well at what it does. And part of that is them making sure they rank good web pages. So I always like to keep this in mind with whatever I'm doing, and are we in line with this goal with Google? And Google's give us specific guidance here. So they say this means relevance and page quality. And relevance is about, are the user's needs met by the page? And I think that's something we all intrinsically as humans can understand. We can do that better than machines. But secondly, they say, how good is the page? And that's what I want to go into detail about, or a little bit of detail, because that can be a little bit more confusing. So what makes a good web page? They've given, again, this is a list from Google. So first off, not misleading. So you're not trying to kind of rank for something that you don't really answer on the page, or you don't really sell, or you don't really provide. Hopefully that should be obvious. Mobile friendly. So your pages now need to be mobile friendly. Most people are using the web on a mobile, and Google has that as a ranking factor. It loads fast. I'm sure, like me, you've been frustrated before at websites before and kind of left because they're taking too long to load. Content isn't obscured by irrelevant ads. Again, this is a specific thing Google's kind of told us about. They're saying, look, this frustrates users. So if you have a web page that's not mobile friendly, it takes ages to load, and it's crammed with ads, we're not going to rank you as well. And the page is secure, so it's got the HTTPS. So what makes a good page is essentially the user experience that wraps your content, your intent. So if you're meeting the intent with great content, that's good. But the second stage is you also need to make the page good, which is these things. These are quite top level things, and you probably, if you sat down and really thought about it, you could write a lot of these down. So this is our kind of checklist as we're sense checking what's going on with our SEO campaign. So the key concept here is that it can be more helpful to focus on Google's long-term goals rather than individual ranking factors, because individual ranking factors change, and sometimes it's kind of the expressions, the tail's wagging the dog, which is you might focus on something that's a ranking factor and miss the bigger long-term picture, and it's not as good long-term investment. And then this is kind of where I want to take this last section, which is what the SEO process looks like. Now, this will vary from person to person and agency to agency, but this is roughly the approach that I take with, or we take with most clients. And I think it gives you a good template to have the best possible chance of success, which is the first thing is you need to define your goals, which is what you're trying to achieve. It sounds obvious, but some people skip that step and start talking about rankings. We start with the technical SEO audit. So what are the limitations and opportunities of the platform we're on, whether we're on WordPress or Shopify or a custom build. We tend to next look at a content audit. So we need to know what content's working and where our gaps and priorities are. And once we've got this in context to your own in-house ability, we can build a strategy, which is looking broadly at what we're going to do to affect the result and how we measure it. And then from all of that, we can actually build a plan. And a plan is who does what and when. And I'll cover these in a little bit more detail. So there's some substance here for you. So when we talk about definition of goals, we want to increase our ranking for, XYZ keyword is actually usually a bad place to start. Where you ideally want to start is with the actual goal, which is, we want to increase our sales or our leads or our donations or whatever it is by 10, 20, 50, 100, whatever percent it is. And the reason for that is a good SEO team or a good SEO person will be able to help you with the keyword research to get the end business result that you want, rather than sort of, randomly picked or vanity rankings. And there's actually a lot of work that goes into good keyword research. So I'd always recommend having an open mind and starting at this place rather than fixating on specific rankings. With technical SEO audits, to keep this, as I said, a non-technical approach, an analogy I like to use because it works quite well is if you think of achieving good rankings like a kind of a Formula One race, and the technical audit is essentially checking that your car's running okay, that you've got air in your tires, because obviously if you start a race and you've got 2 flat tires, you're not going to do very well. But it also highlights the point that technical SEO on its own does not give you success. It's only an enabler for success. Just because your car's in working order and all the tires have got air in doesn't mean you're going to necessarily win the race. So a technical audit, the output from that, what you should be expecting is essentially a prioritized list of suggestions based on their impact and cost to implement. To give you a very brief overview, this is kind of roughly what we'll deliver to clients, which will say who's kind of responsible for solving these issues, why they're issues, and then we give a 1 to 5 estimated difficulty and an impact to fixing that, which will then assign it a priority, and then we can assign dates. So it should be very clear things, and optimization is all about priority. So some of the things near the bottom may never get done, but these are the things that are going to produce results that get you closer to your objective. Alongside this, we'll normally provide a document that explains in detail, this is the issue, this is its importance, this is why it's an issue, here's an example, and here's the solution. So the idea being that you can project manage the implementation with this sheet, and this documentation is for developers or anyone who's involved with the site. The content audit, sticking to our Formula One comparison, content's kind of like your driver. They come in all different kind of shapes, sizes, and skills, but with all technical things being equal, the quality of your content and how much people like it is going to be really key to your success. Content is something, in my experience, website owners, business owners kind of almost do sometimes for the sake of it without putting real effort into it. And a content audit should provide you with an overview of what type of content is working on your site. and where the opportunities are and the direction you should be taking. So again, we'll produce this overview kind of document that will list the pages on your site, what type of pages they are, how much traffic they're getting, how well they've been clicked on in the search results, if you've kind of got duplicate and overlapping content, if you've got content you need to merge or kill off. That's the first place to start. And from all of these things, we can put together a strategy. So we'll take obviously things like competitor research as well, and critically your ability to implement these things. So, you know, what's your in-house skill set? How much time do you have to put into SEO every month? What do you need external help with? And from that, an SEO audit should give you kind of a lighthouse of where you need to go over the next 6 or 12 months. And it might give you some statements like, we're going to improve our ranking by getting links from authoritative websites. So that's a part of a strategy. It doesn't tell you exactly how you're going to do it, but then you know what you're going to do and why you're doing it. The SEO plan is the day-to-day deliverables, and it focuses on governance, timings, and tactics. So the tactic of how you would get those links is specifically, okay, we've decided we're going to make compelling narratives and visuals from our own data and directly send them to journalists. So we're going to compile customer data, insights, make them look good, send them to people that we know will be interested. That's how we're going to get links. So this is where you get to your plan. So the key concept from all of this is that I've seen lots of kind of SEO efforts start from this end we've just been talking about, which is tactics. So they come in and say, okay, let's do SEO. Content's important, so we'll write you 500 word blog posts per month. And in my experience, this rarely produces results because you're missing all of the really critical things that we've already spoken about that are part of Google's longer term plan about, are we meeting intent? What are our actual objectives? You know, this to me is kind of a poor way to start your SEO campaign. So the summary of what I've covered here is search in 2020 is very diverse. You need to think about where you fit in terms of what type of search results you might be eligible for. It's also possible to get insight into the market rate and value of search terms. So I've given you a tool to do that. Chase the algorithm is a term that we use in the industry when people are becoming more focused on the short rather than long term. And your SEO plan needs to come from somewhere. You know, your SEO plan needs to come from a strategy. Your strategy needs to be informed by data such as these audits. You can't just ask someone to say, what's the SEO plan, and then just start naming tactics, because it's not going to be, at worst, it's not going to be efficient. At best, it's not going to be efficient. At worst, you're not going to get anything from it. So the things you can go and try now. I know, Kayleen, it looked like I was ending there, but not quite. So these are 3 things you can go and try. So also asked, put in some topics around what your website's about. And you can immediately then see if your website is actually answering questions that your consumers, customers, your people actually have. The second tool, Semrush, you can look at how well your competitors are doing and what they're up to. And a really nice litmus test is if you think of a key phrase that you would like to rank for, do a Google search for it, look at the first few pages that rank in Google, and then honestly ask yourself, do you have the best page on the entire internet for that search term? And the answer normally is no, but at least it gives you a way you can see what you need to improve. So more resources you can look at as well. I'll do the Q&A. I've got a few questions coming in, which I'll be happy to answer. But some more resources. So every week we do a 20 to 30 minute podcast about SEO and PPC. It's kind of a no fluff approach. So if you want to listen to that, it'll give you a nice way to kind of stay up to date with what's changing and what's happening. If you're in or around Norwich, we run a bi-monthly SEO Meetup, which is obviously on hold at the moment because of COVID. We normally get between 60 and 80 people come. We invite 2 speakers from around the world to come and do 2 talks on SEO PPC. It's all around learning, really nice networking. And finally, if you do want to follow me on LinkedIn, every single day I post an unsolicited SEO tip. I think I'm doing number 337 tomorrow. I've got no idea when I'll run out, But do feel free to kind of connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me any questions you like. And that, Kayleen, that actually is the end there.
Thank you so much, Mark. I hope everyone found that as useful as I did. I also loved the dog coat inclusion in your presentation. That was incredible. So we've had a couple of questions come in on the Q&A and some come in on the chat function. So as we've said, please feel free to pop any questions you have in the Q&A. So Mark, I'm going to go with this one for your first question. Can you share templates used in building an SEO plan?
So it's more an approach really than there's no like template document, if you like. So there, you'll find templates for all of the things that you need to make an SEO plan. So to recap, to make an SEO plan, in my opinion, you need a strategy, which is what you make your plan from. And to make a strategy, you need to do technical audits, content audits, and work out where you're going. So there's the kind of the where we are now. And if you just Google it, you'll find some templates for things like technical and SEO audits. There is a good book that maybe you can include in the email follow-up, Kayleen, about content auditing. I can't remember the author off the top of my head, so I will go and check my bookshelf and share that with you. But from those things, the strategy is really just the context of those things in line with your budget and your in-house capability. So from those things, you'll have a list of, okay, we need to do all of these things. And you might say, well, we can do this half, and then this other half we need help with. And that's when you normally engage with an agency or a freelancer, or you hire someone where you see those gaps are. And then once you've got all those things in place is when you make the plan. And the plan actually, so when we actually implement these plans, we tend to use our clients' kind of project or task managing software in-house. If they don't have any, we use one called Active Collab. And Active Collab is something we put tasks in, we assign them to people, and from that, it builds a timeline. So like a Gantt chart of this is what's happening in July, August, September, and this is who's responsible for it. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks. I also want to do a shout out because I do read the chat, and we've got a gentleman called Jimmy Almond, and he's joining us all the way from Orlando, Florida. I think that's amazing.
Cool.
So hi, Jimmy. So the next question, what role, if any, do tools like Lead Forensic, Candy have in getting results? Sorry about if I pronounced that wrong.
So just so everyone's on the same page, Lead Forensics is a tool that you can put on your website, and it tries to essentially identify repeat visitors, or if you chat with them and they submit their name, so they say, oh, I'm Mark, next time they come back, you'll be able to see who it is. And the same, they try and identify kind of which companies are visiting your site. So there is a whole range of tools like that. Like Hotjar is in a similar vein, in that Hotjar does session recording, so you can see how people are using and where they're clicking on your site. Where they come in terms of SEO is these tools will help you essentially improve the user experience of the site. Now, Google's been quite specific sometimes about what metrics they do and do not use in terms of user experience. And there's certainly a lot of myths in SEO around whether Google use things like bounce rate in their algorithm, which they've repeatedly said they don't. And there's lots of good reasons why that doesn't make any sense. However, the kind of theme of the talk is keeping your eye on this long-term view, which is the long-term view is Google wants to send people to websites they're going to be satisfied with. Tools like Lead Forensics can play a part. Tools like Hotjar can play a part in improving that user experience. So I would always say use them and kind of don't almost worry about the SEO side. If it improves the user experience, that's a positive thing anyway, because it's probably going to improve your bottom line. And even if it's not benefiting you directly from SEO in the long term, it will likely if it's not benefiting you in the short term, it will likely benefit you in the long term once Google works out if that's something they want to track.
Thanks. So the next question is, how did you get the CPC cost on a search term?
So from the screenshot, so the CPC was the cost per click for a key phrase. I, in the screenshot, was using a tool, a browser plugin called Keywords Everywhere. The data is actually available from Google. You can use Google Keyword Planner is the tool if you want to kind of do it manually. The tool I used was called Keywords Everywhere. You install it into Chrome. It costs about $2 for 10,000 searches worth of data. And what it will do is anytime you do a search in Google, it will give you actually lots of other helpful related search terms, but it gives you the search volume and the cost per click as well. And I find that really useful because every search I'm doing, I'm kind of building my background knowledge about what people are searching for and how competitive it is. So Keywords Everywhere is the name of that tool.
Thanks. So we're getting some great questions coming in. So as I said, feel free to ask a question if you have one. So this one, if you're building a brand new online service, how early would you start building a pre-launch website, and any tips for how you would go about it?
Okay. So if by pre-launch website, I'm going to assume that means kind of getting just a holding page or some functional site out there. The general advice in terms of SEO would be, if you're building a new site or planning a new site or launching a new business, is that you should have SEO as part of the process during that build, because the value they will be able to add as SEOs will be the keyword research kind of stuff. Means you can structure your website more closely around user intent. You can make sure you don't have any technical issues. You can make sure you take advantage of things like the schema that I mentioned. So FAQ schema, how-to schema, there's a whole list of things that can enhance your ability to appear in search. As to if you should kind of launch a website earlier, it's not a huge factor. You will find when you launch a brand new website, it's very hard to get a brand new website to rank in Google. The easiest way to think about it is like if you meet someone new, which is kind of like what Google's doing when you put a new website up. If you meet someone new, it takes you a while to trust them, and you need to have lots of interactions with them and see that they respond consistently. And that's similar to be very broad stroke in what Google's doing when you publish a brand new website. Is not going to immediately just trust this website. It's going to look at, like I mentioned in the talk, things like if you obtain links from other good websites and if those links remain. So essentially those people are vouching for you and they're staying vouching for you over time. So if a pre-launch website is kind of just going to be some holding pages and there's nothing really, there, I would say you don't really need to worry about it. Again, going back to what I said in the talk, is it what user intent are you answering by having that pre-launch site if you can't supply the visitors with the thing that they're after?
Thanks. So your next question, is it possible to optimize a site built on platforms such as Wix, etc.? Or would you recommend a bespoke build via WordPress, for example?
So according to Wix, it's very easy to optimize Wix sites. So there are obviously lots of different platforms that people choose for various reasons, because SEO isn't obviously the only reason you go for a certain platform. There's lots of other factors such as, the experience of the team that's actually using that site, cost of maintaining it, upgrading it, speed and cost of getting it set up. So Wix is, in my, how can I word this? In my experience, kind of the starter place with places like Squarespace. So they're the absolute kind of bottom rung of, in my opinion, of kind of a professional web presence. You can make some okay looking sites on Wix. The difficulty is you don't have the full control that you get if, in your example, you've said a bespoke build via WordPress. You don't have the same kind of potential. Now, those platforms have realized that SEO is important. So it's possible, if you're in niches that aren't super competitive, to rank Wix sites, to rank Squarespace sites. It will depend as well on kind of the template you use and however that's built for you. Whether you should use something bespoke like WordPress, if you have budget and you can support it, then yes, definitely, always, because you have more options and you have more control. It just comes down to kind of looking at the website as a business tool, as an investment, and saying, okay, if we had full control over our site and we built something custom and we had a conversion rate of 3% instead of 2%, how much extra money does that bring us in per year, and does that pay for the difference? So I would look at it from that point of view. Again, coming back to what are your business objectives and how much cash have you got to achieve those objectives, and what is the objective difference going to be between using different platforms. So SEO wise, yeah, you can do more with bespoke, and you might struggle in competitive areas if you're confined to platforms like Wix.
Thanks. So, what type of crawler do you prefer? There are many tools out there: Content King, Screaming Frog, SEO Spider, etc. Is any one of them way more thorough and complete than the rest?
No, they're all, so I use both of those tools you've listed. So they're kind of for different things. So Screaming Frog is a very kind of well-known SEO tool with a maybe silly name if you're not in SEO, but 100% use that. I use personally Screaming Frog, and there's a tool called Sitebulb, which are both absolutely excellent. They do slightly different things. So Screaming Frog provides you with a lot of kind of data output from a site, whereas Sitebulb will try and actually explain and put the issues in context. Content King, like platforms like DeepCrawl, is a web cloud-based solution, and that offers something entirely different to things like Screaming Frog and SEO Spider. They're more expensive, but you can leave them running in the background and they'll be continually kind of crawling your website. So it can be very useful to pick up problems as they happen. So for instance, with our larger clients where we've got dozens of people working on a website, developers, content team, and I as an SEO need to know what's going on, we use a platform like Content King, which will send me an email if anything changes on that site that could affect SEO. So if someone updates a page title, if someone updates robots.txt, if a page goes down, if a link breaks, I get an email about it within a few hours of it happening, which is really important for me to do my job. If Content King flags up a problem, I tend to use offline tools like Sitebulb, like Screaming Frog, to diagnose them. So if you can afford them, I would generally try and use all of those. They all have their place. I wouldn't say one is particularly any more thorough or complete than the rest, no.
Thanks. So, can you advise on what type of content generally attracts the best backlinks?
Oh, what a question. Yeah, good. Content that adds value. God, that's such a cliche enough thing to say. So what content gets the best links? Well, think about the type of content that you share with your friends. It's about doing something that either other people haven't done or framing it in a completely different way. So national coverage in newspapers is great, and that happens by normally taking unique data and attaching a narrative to that data, or just doing something kind of way out there that people want to read about. So if there's different tactics to getting links. So if you are doing digital PR, which the target, as we said, maybe is we want to get coverage from newspapers, then you need stories and you need to pass the so what test. So you come up with you go through your ideation, you talk about what you might do, and then you ask, so what, so why would people care about this, and are they going to talk about it? In terms of kind of other stuff apart from digital PR, it's about if I use the example, for instance, on how to change a car battery, so say you're someone like Halfords, we've seen those search results change over the years. And the first people to rank really well as the search results change were the people that made videos for that content. So the type of content isn't just about if it's an article, the length, it's about what format it's in. So I've managed to actually do, fix stuff in my car, and I've done that because I've watched videos, and it would be very difficult for me to try and follow a written guide on my laptop and kind of work out what I'm doing. So it's just, I know it sounds vague, but the question is very broad. It's about not just writing an article because you've gone off and Googled a subject and you've cobbled together what other people have said. It's about unique insight, unique ways to frame data with stories, and it's about presenting stuff in a way that's more helpful than anyone else has done by a significant margin, which I'm not going to lie is a lot of work. To do content properly, most of our clients end up doing way less than they were planning to do, but they do it a lot better. The last thing I guess I'll say on that is that the web is not short of quantity of content, it's short on quality. So that's where you need to focus on competing.
Thanks, Mark. So we've got another question. Is it difficult to go back and sort out the schema for frequently asked questions and how-to pages if it wasn't set up in the first place?
Not particularly, no. So it does depend a little bit on the platform you're on and how the site is built, but there is always a way to do it. At the sort of most desperate ends, there's a tool called Google Tag Manager, which means you can basically, without even changing the code on your website, you can just insert those tags live via JavaScript. It's called Google Tag Manager. So no, there's always a way to go back and do it.
Perfect. So we've got another question. How can you tell what engine a website is built on?
So there's a website actually called builtwith.com. So if you go to builtwith.com and put in a URL, it will tell you if it recognizes the content management system the site's running on. It'll tell you what kind of tracking they use, what versions they're running, what plugins they're running, that kind of stuff.
Thanks.
That was an easy
one. So you've mentioned a book and of course your podcast. What other books, videos, resources would you consider as the holy grail when advising someone who wishes to learn about SEO?
I don't think there is one kind of canonical source you could say is the best place to learn. My advice would be to become active in the SEO community if you want to kind of continue your learning, because we've had examples of where Google has told us very specific things about how certain things work, and then people have gone off and done experiments and shown actually that's incorrect, and the person from Google was wrong, and they've said, sorry, it's very complicated how it all works. We've seen examples where what Google has said doesn't match what is written in the documentation, which doesn't match what we see happening in real life. The SEO community is very active on Twitter. So if you're not on Twitter, that's a place I would kind of join and look to get involved that way. If you are really beginning out, then places like moz.com, moz.com is a good place. They've got some really nice articles on kind of basic intros to SEO. They're a SEO tool provider like Ahrefs, like Content King. All these people provide very good content. You just need to read it with the caveat, obviously, that the motivation for those people, right? What is their motivation for writing that content? So sometimes it can be a little bit skewed towards what their service is, which is why I'd always recommend kind of sense checking everything with the kind of community at large. And it's a very helpful, mostly very welcoming community. Certainly the one we set up in Norwich, SEO Norwich, I know some people have formed some really good friendships from that, and they're helping each other out.
Thanks, Mark. This is our final question, unless any more come in by the time we've answered it. So Mark, do you do any hourly or pre-project freelance SEO consultancy or tune-up tweaking advice on the side for very small businesses with simple drag and drop DIY sites like Wix, Google Sites, etc.? If so, what is the best way to communicate with you? If not, can you advise? Thanks.
So if you drop me an email from the website, so withcandor.co.uk, if it's a sort of a micro business with a Wix site, is probably not something that Candor will be able to help with, just because we are an agency and there's sort of machinery that starts moving whenever we engage with people, but I do know a lot of really good SEO freelancers. So I'm very happy to connect you up with one of them. And again, I would always say that if it's, if it is a startup or a micro business and you've got limited budget for SEO, you will very likely be better off engaging with trusted freelancers rather than agencies, just because by nature, agencies are geared up to offer a slightly different service that probably isn't just going to be a great fit for you.
Thanks, Mark. Right, I think that's everything. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you so much from Mark from Canada for doing an amazing presentation. I also want to say that I love your shirt this morning, Mark. Sorry for taking so long.
Sorry, Kaylee, I just realised you had sent me 2 questions that people had submitted before.
Yes.
Did you want me to answer them? Or?
Yes, go for that.
Okay. I didn't want them to forget because they went to the trouble of doing it before we started. So there's 2 questions that were submitted before we started. One's from Diana, and Diana says, say the subject for a realtor is Bucktown neighborhood. To cover all SEO bases, does the article have to say Bucktown homes, Bucktown condos, selling your Bucktown home? Does Bucktown have to be constantly repeated? So it's quite an easy one to answer, which is no, you don't have to constantly repeat Bucktown or the thing you're trying to rank for. Don't write for search engines, do write for people. They're very good now at analyzing content. Obviously, if your page is about Bucktown, it would be very hard to write good content about that without mentioning that word. So you don't particularly need to worry about that. In terms of, do you need to mention Bucktown homes and Bucktown condos? This is where I'd recommend you flip your thinking from keywords to user intent, meaning if I Googled Bucktown homes, would you want me to land on the same page as Bucktown condos? If the answer is yes, then you combine those on the same page. If the answer is no, then I'd make separate pages for them. And the last question that got submitted before we started was from Tony. And Tony says, are backlinks, so backlinks are links from other websites, are backlinks from sponsored content, e.g. we pay for an editorial piece in an online newspaper that says sponsored on top of the article and in the URL, worth less than backlinks from an organic piece, i.e. that we didn't have to sponsor? So this is a really, really important question because as I said in the talk, links from other websites are important. Search engines use them to help rank content. In Google's guidelines, they specifically prohibit you from paying for or getting sponsored links that manipulate their algorithm. So there's something quite important here, which is that if you have a sponsored piece of content on a newspaper, that link should have what's called a nofollow tag on it. And a nofollow tag is specifically for search engines to tell them this link is paid for, therefore don't count it as kind of a vote for us. Because if we think of this linking as like a voting process, obviously it's like if you were allowed to go around and buy votes, obviously it's not very fair. If you get caught with lots of these sponsored links, so Google detects you've got lots of sponsored links and they haven't got this, there is actually the potential that it could negatively impact your rankings and you could get a penalty for it, which would be very, very bad. So the correct answer is sponsored links technically should be worth nothing in terms of SEO. Only natural organic citations should be worth something. So it's a really important distinction, especially if newspapers are trying to sell you links and they say they have SEO value, then they are potentially putting your business at risk. And I've seen that before. And it's very clear. If you just Google, you can do a search for Google Webmaster Guidelines, link schemes. They're very, very explicit about that advice. I think that's everyone's questions now.
So I think now we are finished and we have answered everyone's questions. So as I said, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. Thanks, Mark, and your amazing shirt for gracing us with your presence. And we really hope to see you again on one of our chamber webinars or virtual events. So it's goodbye from me. I'm so stealing that from somewhere else. And it's goodbye from Mark.